12:05. We have a full agenda today. And first order of business to establish a quorum. And seeing we have all planning commissioners here, we do have quorum. Is there anyone that will be speaking before the planning commission today? And if so, raise your right hand and just say, I will, after I say what I'm going to say. Do you promise to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth before the planning commission? Great. Disposition of many minutes. So we're going to start with the disposition of the July 1st meeting minutes. And those who are eligible to vote are myself, Nancy Bain, and John, you're able to vote on this one as well. So hopefully everyone has looked through those minutes.
I move that we adopt the minutes as presented.
A second.
All right. Any discussion on them? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All right. Those meetings are adopted. Disposition of the July 15th meeting minutes, and that will be Austin, Nancy, and John again. And I will not be able to vote on that one, nor will Andy Stone.
So I'll once again move that we accept the minutes as presented for the July 15th meeting.
Second.
Any discussion? Okay, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All right, those minutes are adopted. August 5th meeting minutes, and this will be everyone except for Commissioner Bain. So this is the August 5th.
I'm in favor of the second.
I move that we accept the minutes of August 5th as presented.
I will second. Austin, second. Any discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Okay. Those have been adopted. The September 2nd special session public hearing minutes, and this is everyone. Hopefully everyone has looked through those. Okay. Someone like to make a motion?
I'll move once again to accept the September 2nd special meeting minutes as
Second.
presented.
And a second from
Nancy.
Bain. Any discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Okay. And finally, disposition of the September 20th special session minutes, and this would be myself, Nancy, and Austin.
Andy.
Oh, Andy Stone, I'm sorry. Yep, I'm sorry, not Austin. So here,
I move that we accept them.
Second.
second by Nancy. Any discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Okay. Cases. We have Title 41 for Marietta Memorial Freestanding Emergency Department on 206 Columbus Road. Director Riggs, do you want to start us off with this, and then we can hear from...
Yeah, we've had, thank you, Mayor, we've had some chance to look at Marietta Memorial Freestanding Emergency Hospital located on 206 Columbus Road. We did get some revised plans yesterday afternoon, and I spent the evening yesterday and this morning with Jessica Dine and the Engineering Public Works to review those, and we did have some comments that I've put on your desk. But these plans are, they do address most of what we've talked about before. These are new comments that have come up. They're kind of minor. Most of them are fairly minor comments. But we would like to see the landscaping plan, and I won't go into detail on all this. We'd like to see a photometric plan to review that. We'd like to make sure that they field locate and verify all the existing, especially the stormwater utility that's out there. We need some additional information on the BMPs that they've got a turbine system that they want to install, and so we'd like some additional information on that. And you can read that. There's a couple pages of it. If anybody has any questions, I'd be more than happy to answer them.
Chairman. If I can make a point. So I did meet with the representatives of the engineering firm out on this particular site, and one of the things that I had brought up before is specifically the storm situation there. You know, we traipsed through the weeds and we found all the existing infrastructure that's there so that they could shoot that in. And while there needs to be some additions to the plans, the alignment is sufficient to meet my concerns that we had, you know, which was basically the that they captured existing conditions the way that they are, because it could create a major problem if they didn't capture those. And my review of these plans that they've resubmitted indicates that they have captured those. Now, there are some notes on there that still say as per city GIS, which is incorrect because we went out there and we told you where it was, so it's not per city GIS, it's per where we told you where they were. And so if you can get that stuff updated, as well as these other things that were identified by the Engineering and Public Works Department. In the past, this body has approved Title 41 plan reviews with the condition that the designer make the changes required by the Engineering and Public Works Department. And I would propose that be the direction we go today.
And Director Riggs, did you state that you're still waiting on the landscaping plans?
We'd like to see the updated landscaping plans. Those weren't included in that submission that came yesterday. We are planning, I think we're planning on going to the Shade Tree Commission on the 14th, which is a week from today, 7 p.m. with those plans, but I'd like to get those and get those distributed to everybody as soon as possible.
Okay. I was looking at particular at the parking plan and noting what's required versus what they're going to provide under these plans is that they're required 49 parking spaces, but they're going to have 80. They're required to have 5 ADA parking spaces, and they're actually going to have 9. So certainly compliant when it comes to parking.
Has anyone looked at the driveway alignments with the road and made sure that they make sense with other businesses and other activity that is out there?
Yes, the staff has looked at that. If you'll note, one of the comments is, and we had discussed this with the developer, that the southeast entrance on Columbus Road be for emergency access only. That'll make the alignments with what's going on across the road better. It's really no better location than where they have for the main in and out for this project. This is really the best location for it.
So the east entrance you're indicating is going to be emergency?
Yes, the east entrance, sorry, yes, yeah.
Okay. That makes sense.
And everything complies with the floodplain regulations out there?
We are still working through that. They're working through FEMA's floodplain, the floodway requirements. Those have to be approved at the federal level. And so Mr. Sands is in communication with our district office in Chicago about getting through all of that. If I'm not out of turn, if the planning commission is going to vote to approve today with conditions, I would make sure that one of those conditions that we're approving for is approval through FEMA.
Okay.
So that and the landscaping.
Yeah, that's actually included in the notes there for the FEMA conditional letter of approval.
Okay.
For the commission's knowledge, this will close a long-standing open, I guess, deviation from what the current flood insurance rate maps say up there by the developer here going through this process on this project, which is probably something that should have happened 20 years ago with the original commercial subdivision that was built, and it was never a closed process through FEMA, and this will close it. So it's actually a step in the right direction. That probably should have happened, like I said, 20 years ago.
Yeah, for sure.
I know Sands Decker is here. Do you want to make comment to anything?
Scott Sands with Sands Decker. Just wanted to introduce myself and say I'm available for any questions. Also say the city staff has been just fantastic to work with on this project, so we appreciate all the help that they've given us. Available for any questions.
Does anybody have any questions?
The only thing I would like to say is I think this is going to be a wonderful addition to the community out there on Columbus Road.
I agree with you. You know, this is going to bring, as I understand it, 60-plus jobs into the city, and it's going to provide emergency services on that northwest quadrant of the city, so this is great. So should we make a motion? Would someone like to make a motion with conditions?
I would move that the planning commission accept and approve the Title 41 review with conditions presented by the code, EPW, and planner staff be completed prior to construction beginning.
I'll second that.
So we have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Hearing none. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. All right. Title 41 adopted. Moving on. Now we have before us case number 21-03, City Council Resolution R-10-21, request to consider amending Athens City Code Title 23, zoning code, off-street parking, and Table B, off-street parking requirements. As you're all aware, a lot of our disposition of minutes all had to do with the meetings that we had and the subsequent special sessions that we did hold that was in the purview of the Planning Commission. And as we move forward, again, it's just good to remind people that based upon the decision or the vote on the amended Athens City Code Title 23, that it will potentially go to City Council for opportunities for citizens to continue to engage with City Council. But at this point, it's before us. I'm going to turn it over to Director Stone. If you would like to speak to where we are at this point in time with this piece of legislation.
Thank you, sir. All right, for the planning commission members that are here, there's lots of paper in front of you, but to do some clarification, the document that has the date of 10/7/21 on the top of it with only yellow highlights included is the quote-unquote clean version, that if we approve the changes today, that's what we would return to the city council for them to take up as our approved planning commission review of this recommended change to the zoning code. I'd ask you to set that aside right now and instead go, we're going to go kind of line by line to talk about the specifics in the one that has the multicolors, and that's the one behind it. If you look at it, and it's got several, it's got yellow and green and like an aqua blue, and those are the ones that we'll talk through. So I know that all of us met separately with Paul Logue, the city planner, so everyone has some familiarity with this, but ultimately what we did is we took the recommended changes to the zoning code that city council forwarded to us, and we reviewed it as a city administration, and then we took into consideration all the spoken testimony from the public hearing that we had, as well as the written testimony that we received from members of the public, both for and against or suggesting modifications. And we tried to incorporate those suggestions as best we could. Ultimately, we think that the changes that we've come up with to the recommended change legislation both meets the goals of reducing onerous parking requirements and turning some land that currently is devoted to parking unnecessarily to a higher and better use, while at the same time protecting our neighborhoods and the character of our neighborhoods, particularly the R1 zones, which I think were some of the biggest concerns of folks that had issue with the proposed changes. So, that is the purpose of what we did by combining our recommended changes with the changes that council had already put forth for us to consider. So going down through the list, the way that this document reads, anything that's highlighted in yellow or is not struck through with any or is struck through with not any highlights are those original changes with City Council. If something is struck through in green, that is something that we have subsequently said, no, we need to strike through this and as a planning commission as a recommended deletion that we have. If something is in green that's in caps, that's an item that we recommended adding as a planning commission based upon the suggestions that we got from city staff and from members of the public who commented. And then lastly, the portion that are in all caps, strike through, and are highlighted in aqua are recommended additions by city council that were recommended deletions by the planning commission. So I realize that the different colors can be a little bit confusing, but this kind of guides us all towards the different direction that we were attempting to achieve here. So going down through the first section, the recommendation was that the current 180 square feet of excessive per parking space be changed from a less than to a more than, and we disagreed with that. You got to have a minimum on parking spaces. However, we're recommending that. Otherwise, people will say that this could be the parking space, right? As far as the square footage, but we recommended shrinking that to 150 square feet, which is more in line with compact cars with on-street parking that we have in a lot of places around the city. So we think that that's sufficient. Going on down, you note that there's a change in green where it says or R3 zone is a recommended addition by Planning Commission. And this specifically addresses Mr. Wharton's comment, I think, from the public hearing that we had, which talked about currently stack parking is not permitted in single-family dwellings in R3 zones, which is silly, and that just causes us to have to increase more space devoted to parking spaces in order to have individual access to that. And in all those cases, people can, that live in those single-family dwellings that are rentals in R3s, they can coordinate with their roommates to figure out how to get in and out and who needs to move whose car when. And so we think that addition is a reasonable addition. Moving on, if you go down to 230801D, this was a recommended change by council, and we believe that should stay that 1,000 feet. That change is fine. It's easy to walk. 1,000 feet is less than a quarter mile. So moving from 250 feet, and that gives some flexibility to businesses, particularly to have their allocated parking a little bit further from their facility, even if it's not. That gives some flexibility to them. Moving on down, there's a significant amount of strike through that was recommended by the council, or was in the initial proposed change. And we think a joint use parking agreement is appropriate there, and so that should stay. Moving down to F, right now the code is in error because it refers to a B1 downtown business zone, and that is not correct. It's B2D by our zoning. So what we're saying is strike B1 and change it to B2D, which is the correct zoning that this particular section is referring to. We also believe that it's unnecessary to put this reference to a joint use parking agreement as per 230804, because the B2D by definition is already allowed to use the improved public parking as its business parking, which is the parking garage, the city municipal parking garage. And as long as that parking garage exists, which we don't foresee it falling down anytime soon, it will continue to be able to be the business parking for those businesses that build in the B2D. So we didn't think that change was necessary to add that joint use parking agreement. Moving on down to 230804, you can see these are the original changes that that the council proposed, or that the council member that proposed the changes proposed, with basically striking the current language on joint facilities and putting a joint use parking, loading and unloading agreement. We agree, based upon both the feedback from the public as well as the staff review, that this is a good change. One of the things that came up was the inability of the code office to track deed restrictions over time. And that's true. That's not something that we would review every year. However, it is something that we can check on the front end when a permit comes through to see what exists as far as the legal instrument, whether it's an easement, a deed restriction, or a lease. I think we had said or other was something that, and I don't think it reflects in here, but that was, we can check that at the beginning, and then in the future, if there's a complaint, 3 years down the road, 5 years down the road, we can go back and look at what that original permit said, go back to the owner and say, wait a minute, you brought a lease at the beginning that said you're going to use parking for over here, and your lease is still in effect? And they say, well, no, we let that lease run out. And they said, well, they're no longer in compliance, and then they're in violation. So based upon complaint in future years, we think we can that this is workable, bottom line. Did I say that correctly? Yes. Mr. Riggs? Okay, thank you. All right, moving further, we don't recommend any changes in 230805C, E, or F. In all cases, Title 27 adequately addresses the concerns with those changes related to how much of it is paved. Likewise, 230325 there in E is the dark skies efforts to make sure that our lighting, because it says right now adequately lighted in the zoning code here, or this portion of the zoning code. That other portion of the zoning code was passed later, and that's specifically talking about not overlighting things and having to cut off lights and such. So it's just a kind of a cleanup language, and that's sufficient. And then there was a original proposal to strike through the parking being permitted on the roof of a structure, and we don't think that should be removed. We think it should be modified because there are some locations in the city where on-roof parking is currently taking place, a couple. And then our thinking is that as long as plans are prepared by a design professional, structural plans are prepared by a design professional, and there's a 4-foot wall around the facility, we think that should remain in there. All right, going to the 230806 exceptions, and this is where the majority of the changes based on the public input that came from the citizens that spoke at the meeting as well as what we got. That's where the majority of the changes are taking place. So, originally it said the number of required parking spaces may be reduced as follows, and we said may be reduced, and this is a clarification from the minimum required number of parking spaces in Table B, because that's really what we're talking about reducing them from, is from that bulk controls table. So we believe that needs to be added. Remind me, this blue portion right here, we struck this because...
We combined
That's right.
the discussion about transit, we just added that as into the exception.
Into the exceptions. Okay, that's the reason why that first portion goes away completely, or we recommend that it goes away completely, because we just included that as one of the exceptions. There in number 1 then, the exceptions, the minimum required vehicle parking spaces may be reduced for up to 50% versus 75%. We thought 75% was a little excessive, and we think 50% is more appropriate. The second item, B there, replacing, this is just kind of cleanup language as opposed to substituting. We think that is clear by saying replacing. And then E. So E is really the one where we address the concern that we heard about transit from folks at the meeting, that ultimately you could have a situation where you had a transit line that ran through an R1 zone, and you could create a situation where people didn't have any parking because the transit line ran through an R1 zone. And so we think we've cleaned that up here, and that number 1, it's unnecessary to refer to plan unit developments, because every plan unit development goes to council anyway. And so zoning doesn't really apply, so you don't even, it's kind of redundant to say that a plan development. So instead, we struck that and stuck in here, development sites in R3, B2, B2D, B3, and M zones that are within 1,500 feet of an existing public transit service stop. It's not the line, because they don't run on a hail system, they run on a stop system. So from the stop, and then note that it doesn't include R1 zones in here. So we think that these two changes adequately address the concern that folks had, while at the same time still being in the spirit of the proposed changes in the first place, which is to try to make less onerous requirements on parking. Proceeding on down through the next section, if you get to, let me say this correctly, to F, and I'm sorry, to G, residential tax incremental financing projects. That's just a cleanup language. We think that was just an omission that came from the council. Moving on down to the 230807 allowable uses of excess parking spaces. So these are the changes that said that, people who had and met parking requirements at the time, now have the opportunity to make changes, so long as they conduct a study, number one, that says that the parking is not necessary, and then number two, that the municipality has reduced the minimum parking requirement since the building was permitted, such that the spaces converted would no longer be required. So if they can demonstrate that they don't use them, or if the code changed such that it would no longer be required, they can come back and seek a reduction. We did switch the code enforcement office to the service safety director, and that's more in line with the remainder of our code, in that the service safety director is the approval authority for all permits, simply because that's a standing office that exists in our code, whereas the subordinate offices could change over time. So in most cases, I defer to the judgment of the departments anyway. And then going down to the bulk controls, the items in yellow, and this is that table B, the items in yellow were the original changes that they had proposed, and we thought the first couple of them made sense here. Getting into the third one on that last page, I'm sorry, second to last page, we added banks, businesses, and professional offices not providing on-site customer service. And this, I think, addressed one of the business owners' concerns that came before the public hearing. Going down to the blue, or the aqua, this is really, where it gets most most specific. Is there a chance for you guys to talk on this one? Make sure I get this correct. So, the accessory dwelling and the mixed-use dwelling, those were the original changes that were proposed, and we think those should be struck. And instead, we thought we could adequately address those by inserting the duplex townhomes and the owner-occupied single-family homes and the dwelling non-owner-occupied single-family homes as portions of these other changes. So, can you speak to that a little bit more?
Yeah, well, to start with Andy, or Service Safety Director's son, we did combine the duplex townhomes and multifamily into one section because they are of a similar nature, while also separating out owner-occupied single-family residential as well as non-owner occupied single-family residential, because we heard from the meetings and we're all aware there's a difference between those type of uses. The accessory dwellings was struck because based on current language, they're not permitted to have an accessory dwelling in an R1 zone. And if you've got multiple buildings in an R3 zone, then you're going to treat that as multiple buildings in an R3 zone, or in an R2 for that matter. What it does, in essence, it reduces the amount of parking required for an apartment or a rental that has one occupant. Currently, if you've got a one-bedroom, one permitted occupant, Uptown Athens, you're required to provide 2 parking spaces. This allows for 1 parking space to be provided if there's 1 permitted occupant. But then for each additional occupant, you continue to maintain a requirement to provide 1 parking space for each permitted occupant, which is the same as what city code has right now. It clarifies that for owner-occupied, single-family residential, there's still a requirement to have 2 spaces as written in code today. However, if you have a non-owner occupied single-family residence, in that situation, you are required to provide 1 space per occupant. So if you've got 3 unrelated people living in an R1 single-family home, which is what we have, which is what's allowed today, you still have to provide 3 parking spaces, no difference. But it's just clarifying that language to make sure that it's understood to applicants, and then addressing the situation of if you have 1 or 2 people living in a home, whether it's a family or whether it's two people, say that they're unrelated. If you've got 2 unrelated people living in a home, then you're only required to provide 2 parking spaces. Does that make sense?
Yep, absolutely.
Thank you, Andy.
So we can continue on down so that's that last page here, to the medical. We think the veterinary addition makes all the sense in the world, as well as increasing to every 400 square feet of floor area instead of every 200. That seems to be in line with the uses that medical and veterinary uses that we see around the city right now. Then the next section, and this is this was about restaurants, nightclubs, and similar facilities, and there's a lot related to the additional spaces for the interior. You know, we're seeing that you know, restaurants, you know, now are functioning differently than maybe your traditional restaurants. So we thought that 250 square feet per floor area made a lot of sense, just to simplify that, to say 1 space for every 250 square feet. And then this last section down here with the except to specified convenience stores, department stores, drug stores, and grocery stores, just having it for 250 square feet as well. If you remember the exceptions relative to the transit stops, we think that will allow for, you know, maybe some of the larger stores that have to create large parking lots, or would have to create large parking lots because of this 250 square foot floor area requirement, could be mitigated by being near a transit stop. And then I think the last 2 are just little cleanup languages here with the way that square feet is written. But so we think that we incorporated the concerns of the public, as well as continuing to meet the spirit of the original intent of this, which is to maybe remove some of the more onerous parking requirements that we have that cause us to devote more space than is necessary to parking, and instead allows some of that space to be better utilized for a higher and better use.
All right, I'd like to start with any comments from the planning commissioners on said changes. Also note that you do have a quote-unquote clean copy here that just has the yellow highlights where the strike-throughs and additions have been put into this document.
So I just wanted one clarification, well, both of them are clarifications. So under 230807, where we talk about an existing property owner who may want to come back and make some adjustment to what requirements they had previously, it talks about a parking study. This doesn't necessarily have to mean that they're hiring a consultant to do this study. It could be, for instance, if somebody collects good data, a property owner collects good data about over the years about how many spaces they actually use with the apartments, they could use that data. They could internally do their own parking study. Is that correct?
That's how I would interpret it if I were
Okay.
the one looking at this as the surface safety director, as opposed to requiring some sort of consultant to do the
Okay.
study.
I think that's good. And then back on the last page, then, when we were talking about the bulk about the 1 parking space for each 250 square feet area, is that a net area, a gross area? Does that include storage space and, the kitchen and all of that? Is it all inclusive?
Typically, what the code office does is look at the usable space. So restrooms, storage areas that aren't going to typically be occupied are not included in that square footage calculation.
Okay.
So mechanical rooms, stuff that you wouldn't typically occupy, we just look at the space that you would typically use and occupy. So that number will be reduced from the gross square footage of a building.
And we don't need to put more information in here on that. That's just
We've
the
historically
standard.
done it that way, and we'll
Okay.
continue to do it like that.
Simple question for 230807, that's an or situation, not an and situation, correct? Either one of those would apply, right?
Well,
If they have the parking study, are they able to do it, or do they also need the?
so number 2 relates to the fact that if the code changes and reduces the amount of parking, that they'd have to demonstrate. So it is,
Okay.
it is an
It is
and.
an and, okay.
Yeah, it's not an or.
Okay, thanks.
So they, like, for instance, an example would be, you know, if someone said, well, the code changed, so I don't have to provide the space anymore. You know, well, not necessarily. You got to demonstrate to the city that you don't need it via a study. Now, the study can be, you know, you collecting your own data and showing it. It doesn't have to be a high-priced consultant, but it's merely because the code changed that you get to automatically reduce the space.
Okay, nothing from you, Nancy? Yeah, a lot of work went into this and a lot of listening to, again, both the opposition as well as the support for the parking, off-street parking. I will offer brief comments from anyone who's here and wants to speak to this.
Will be very brief, because of much of what you said today is what I plan to address. Ryan? Good deal. Okay, my name's Alan Swank, live at 40,000 Place, speaking on behalf of myself. If you look at the screen right here, you're standing at the corner of Watt and Maplewood yesterday at about 3:15. Yeah, you're looking east. This is the car pickup line for students at the New East Elementary. This is looking the other way. You're looking west on Maplewood, school and the playground there to your left. This is looking east on Maplewood, school on your right. And then this is looking around the corner at extension of Lloyd Street as it goes over to Sunnyside. That car on your right is stationary. There's nobody in that car. Car on your right, nobody's in that car either. Car there on the left, nobody's in that car. And that car there on the right, nobody on that car either. I think what I heard makes this statement a moot point, but I think what I heard in the presentation that Mr. Stone had is that the 1,500 feet thing from a transit line has been pulled. With that in there, the great fear was there would be more cars placed on these streets between 3 and 345, but now that you pull that out, kind of alleviates the problem, more cars. We do still have, and this is kind of off topic, we still do have, and Mr. Stone, I've been talking about this, a safety issue here, should we have fire or any of that in it. That said, I'd really like to thank this Plan Commission for seriously engaging the public early in the process in this. This was great. Too many times the train's already left the station, but this was great that the public was truly listened to. I don't know if this is part of something you could recommend to council, and I don't know if what you've said today puts an end to this, but as I think Joni said last time, perhaps if this isn't the end of this, the suggestion to council might be, because we will have 4 newly elected council members in a little over a month, to possibly convene a task force to take a look at parking as a whole in Athens on a zone-by-zone basis, R1, R2, R3, because the zones are different and they do have unique needs. But again, I'd like to thank you for what you've done over the last month. That is a very comprehensive plan, and I truly feel that the citizens of Athens were listened to. Thank you.
Kernansky, 56 Mound Street. No pictures, wasn't sure what to expect. Mr. Stone's ability to go through corrected versions of this is pretty astounding based on the fact we used 4 or 5 colors. And at some point I'd like to see a copy of it. I don't know if I'm going to get it in color or not. 2 things, I mean, there's several things that still disturb me about what you're proposing. The 1,000 feet. And the reason I say that is because on the street that I live, we have that situation at 250 feet. And I monitored it for several years. And the third person in the house always parked on the street. And for convenience, I mean, why should they drive 250 feet, and that was the crow flies, but we're talking several blocks around the corner to park at this dedicated spot? It doesn't work. That's my experience. The other thing that's really disturbing, and I had a question about the 15 feet, but now it's from the actual stop, not the line, but it includes R3. My R1 neighborhood is surrounded by R3. So if you take away the previous code restrictions for parking in R3, already established R3s, and allow the landlord to do a self-study, aren't we looking at a slippery slope? I mean, I'm going to take this nationally. Would you let Pfizer do all the studies for their COVID vaccination? No, because it's a self-interest thing. You can't allow the landlord to do the study. Either the code has to do the study, or it has to be required to go before some other board to be investigated, because you're just asking for problems. And to do a follow-up on this 1,000 feet, I mean, I can speak to several incidences that were approved by the board with restrictions. One in particular was off Mill Street, and the property was given a variance for a gravel parking lot, but had to put a cement buffer up 10 feet, and also had to abide by shade tree recommendations. Well, I never bothered with the shade tree stuff, although they never complied with that ever, and still to this day, and that had to be 10 years ago. It took me 4 years through the previous administration and the previous code office to finally get the code down there to make them comply with the 10 feet buffer of cement or pavement on the gravel parking lot. And then to throw all this into complaint-driven, I mean, I don't think it's a citizen's job to follow up on this. I think we need to go back to 250 feet and let that go to the Board of Zoning Appeals for approval. It just solidifies the possibility of the right thing happening according to the law. And I'm afraid if you do this R3 thing, 1,500 feet from a bus stop in my neighborhood, and do a self-study by a landlord, those cars are going to end up on my street, because the cars are going to exist. Anyway, so thank you for all your work and for listening.
Okay. I'm seeing heads shaking. Okay, all right. Would someone, if there's no other comment, and no other comment from the commissioners, someone like to make a motion to adopt and send this on to city council, or to not adopt?
I'll move that we adopt the revised documents as prepared by Mr. Stone and Mr. Riggs and Mr. Logue as well, I guess. Second.
And a second from Nancy Bain. Any discussion? I do want to say that this is not that dissimilar from, some of you may remember, the short-term rentals, to where we took in a lot of the public comment, both for and against, and came to, again, a common ground to make that decision. And this is the same. I congratulate all who worked on this, and in particular, I know that Paul Logue, city planner, and Director Riggs, and certainly Andy Stone, but this body, discussed this on multiple occasions. We did take into account all the conversations, all the written and verbal testimony, trying to find the best common ground possible as we looked at this. So that's my only comment on this. And again, I will remind everyone that this, if voted in the affirmative, this will go on to City Council. City Council will take it up for its 3 readings in 30 days. So there is more opportunity for the public to speak when that moves to council. Yes, Mr. Swank.
Mr. Mayor, if I could ask a quick question, assuming it gets passed today and goes back to council and goes through the normal legislative process, can it be amended?
It can. City Council could actually take this up and go, we like the original version, and can actually move forward with the original amendments. This is the recommended amendments coming from the Planning Commission.
Great, okay, thank you.
Okay.
I would also like to thank Councilperson Fall and I guess Paul was originally a part with her of putting this together. I don't know who all on council, but I think this is something is long overdue. And I think hopefully, I don't know what the end result will look like on this. Hopefully something will actually be voted on by council. But I also want to point out that this can change over time too, as we look at it and see how it works or doesn't work. Hopefully, people can continue to adjust it and make it work better. But I think this is long overdue, and I'm really appreciative of those that, from beginning to this point have been involved in it.
Okay, hearing no other discussion, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Okay, it's unanimous. It will move on to City Council, and I believe we'll get that to the Clerk of Council later today or tomorrow? Tomorrow. All right, I really appreciate both of you sitting through everything at this point in time. We probably should have amended the order in which we do business to get you up first, but communications, Title 41. We're going to start with 280 East State Street, addition and renovations, Montel LLC.
Hi, my name is Trent DeBruin. I'm with BSWC Architects here in Athens, Ohio, 603 West State Street. Do you need my home address?
No, that's just,
Okay,
your business is fine.
good. So Kurt commissioned us to help him with this project. The intent is to take an existing building. The front office area would remain the same. The intent is to take the rear office area, remove the roof, take it down to slab, leave the exterior walls, and build a 3 apartments, 3 handicap accessible apartments, and 1 office area at the rear portion of that building, and then I'll add a second floor to the rear portion and make that be 4 apartments. There is an existing area over top. In the existing front portion, there's a little area there that is going to become an apartment as well, which would be an interior renovation. We have been working with the utility companies and the electric line at the rear of the parking lot and coordinating that. We have been working with the city obtaining information regarding existing utility lines to the site. There's adequate parking on the site. We have received variance for various items for this project. And the intent is to make the rear of the building more similar to the front of the building and the style of the front building, so it's more attractive to the community instead of just being like a facade there. So and unify that whole building so it looks as one. So that is the intent of the project. Certainly the handicap accessibility in the first floor apartments is a large part of what Kurt wants to do here. And another item that he was proposing was that, I don't know if this is the correct group, but potentially moving the bus stop to this site. He's open to that if that's something that someone would be willing to, a group or whichever entity that would be interesting to entertain that idea.
Is this the
LCR,
Okay.
Yes,
Okay, I thought so, I just wanted to make sure.
yes, has some glass block and on the front of the building, yes.
This is all, I'm sorry, this is all B zone, right? B zone, so you're proposing first floor residential in B zone, B1?
They got a variance for that, Mr. Stone.
Okay.
Yes.
They went to
Alrighty.
BZA, I forget when it was, a couple months ago. And it was
Yes.
that and setbacks as well. They also
Yes.
talked about second story, adding the second story. They got approval from the BZA.
Well, you can do that. I just didn't think we could do first floor unless it was with a variance, first floor residential in a B1 zone. That's an office space that no longer will be one now. Think about,
Any other questions for Trent?
Some of the food place, right?
Again, this is a communication, so this will come back to us as a case. I'm going to throw this to Director Riggs. Any comments from you or from?
Now, the reason this is coming before the Title 41 is it's actually a 5,100 square foot change. So if it had been, there's just 100 square feet over the requirement needed to go to the Planning Commission for review. So it's fairly small, it's a fairly small project.
It's Conrad's building. I can't remember. Oh, I can't remember. I wish I had that in there. Thanks.
Any other questions? No?
I need a minute.
Need a map?
I need to go.
Okay. Hearing nothing, thank you. We will bring this forward at the next Planning Commission meeting as a case.
So there's no-
Excellent, thank you.
The next communication, again, titled 41. This is Crenshaw Green Apartments, Phase 3 and Phase 4 off of State Route 682. Again, as a reminder, this is the property that was annexed into the city of Athens by City Council. And the Woda Cooper Group is already, has, if I'm not mistaken, has broken ground on Phase 1 and Phase 2. And moving forward, so this would be an addition to that, 2 more structures on that particular property.
Mayor, I don't think we have anybody here representing WODA. I tried to communicate with them yesterday and this morning, didn't get any response back. So they may want to do their communication at the next Planning Commission meeting on the 14th, if that's possible.
Very good. Director Riggs, do you have, if we were to go through the process, and we will, as a case, as Title 41 moving forward, can you give us any ideas to how many additional housing units Phase 3 and
Yeah,
Phase 4
It's
would?
actually on the plans. I think there's,
Phase 3 is 54, and Phase 4 is 30.
30?
Yeah, so it's a total of 84 additional low-income housing tax credit units.
I should add, City of Athens, we have heard from Woda Cooper about the possibility of having the speed limit change on 682. Again, that would require, ODOT being involved in that process. And so I think that Director Stone, that with our new Director of Engineering and Public Works, that, we're certainly looking to see if something like that could be done, because this would certainly increase the volume of vehicles that'll be running along this stretch.
So if I could speak to a couple items.
You can.
On this. So since we had a preliminary meeting with the designer and the developer for this, and that's when I say we, I mean city staff, where we spoke to a couple of the different items. One of the things that we were real clear with them is now that they're going to have functionally 4 different complexes or 4 different buildings in this area, all on the other side of a state highway, with this many people living at this location, they have to make a connection to the city's bike and pedestrian infrastructure system. And I would recommend when the time comes for this commission to condition this development partially, in part, on them meeting that requirement. Because as it stands now, there are some internal sidewalks in order to get from your front door at the apartments to the parking lot, but there's nothing to go and get you to the sidewalk system of the rest of the city, to the bike path system of the rest of the city. So I would expect that they will bring forward some sort of design that accommodates them. The other comment that I have is preliminary indications are that even with the geometry of the roadway and this proposed development, the ODOT's look at the warrant for dropping the speed limit on that state highway, it does not meet the warrant under the thing. So, and you can want to drop the prima facie speed limit all day, but if it doesn't meet the warrant, then that warrant process is a real deliberate process that talks about volume and talks about geometry and talks about driveways and trips out of those driveways as a reason to drop a speed limit on a state highway, and it currently doesn't meet it. So even if we want to do it, I don't know that, at least as it stands now, pre-construction, that we'll be able to get the state to drop that, or the city to drop the portion inside the city. That's the initial response that we've gotten from District 10.
They're going to drain the pond, right?
They are.
Okay. You know I was going to say that, but I really want to know how close they are to the road. I took a beating on that one. I just wanted to make sure. All right.
And the first two phases of this, as I'm looking at this map, are to the left.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Is it,
And let me ask a question. What requirement would ODOT have about crossing that road with a bike lane or sidewalk? What's going to be, how would that look? I mean, I don't know where they would want to do this, and
Yeah.
if they'd want to try to get all the way up to the light at 682, or, I mean, and Union, but how would they cross that?
Well, I mean, I've got some initial thoughts, and part of my response to them was, say, give me a plan, and they've got design professionals on their staff that can look at the literature and the best practices to say that, my gut feel is a rapid rectangular flashing beacon, similar to what we've used at a couple other locations in the city, somewhere in the best from a sight distance perspective location, relative to the geometry of the roadway, so that you could see the crossing from the farthest distance, depending upon you're coming northbound or southbound, and that be the spot. And then, you have one of those devices, similar to where we have a crossing on, West Union, and we got one on East State Street, kind of where, it's a pedestrian actuated device that then, gives a flashing indication when someone goes across at the location.
I mean, right now, there is bike traffic that flows from, off of Armitage across to Lurig. I mean, that's a great location, because of already the existing traffic that goes there. And it would get you back to the connectors to the path as well. But, okay, I'll be real interested to see if that's gonna be a requirement and this group is gonna reinforce that. I'll be really interested to see how they plan to do that.
Yeah.
So one more question. How close are these buildings to the road?
I suppose we can scale it. Do you have a,
I was looking at the site and drainage plan and I can't seem to find
It looks like about 30 feet.
30 feet, my front yard, huh?
I'm gonna say something like that. It,
Says
well, no, it's more than that. I take that back. It's more than that.
Oh, what's
I
the-
bet it's closer to 60 feet.
to the road?
To the road, it's, well, if you look on to the
Which
right
one?
of way, I'm guessing, Nancy, I'm looking at page, it's
I didn't-
tough to see, but I'm looking at page C100. At the building there for phase 3, it does say 25-foot front setback. And it appears to me, based on that scale, that the 25-foot front setback is from the right-of-way, but the road is probably, I think what John said, around 55 or 60. That would
Yeah,
look
that's
accurate.
what I'm thinking it is.
It's tough, though, that scale is so small on a page like this. My eyes aren't as great as they used to be.
Yours?
Getting worse every year.
25 feet though, huh? Oh,
To the
you don't
right,
know.
to the right of way,
Yeah, I
yeah.
know.
Yeah, I
Right?
think,
Oh, well, I'm gonna stop.
I think it's pretty close to 60 feet
Yeah.
to
To the
the
road.
face of the building from the road.
But that's not really very much when you have kids around. Oh, well. It's mine.
We did ask about draining the pond, and when we talked to them, I think right now they're actually relocating wildlife from that pond over to the wetland that the city developed on the Northwest Bike Path Spur project. So
Is the University of State's stormwater draining into that pond?
it is, and
So what happens to that?
they extend that 48-inch culvert that goes underneath 682 through the area where the pond currently is, and then further back on that parcel, and then it discharges into, what's the name of that creek?
Factory Creek?
Factory Creek.
Factory Creek.
Little Factory Creek.
And that dumps into the river, the Hocking River.
Margaret's Creek.
No, Margaret's
Margaret's
Goes into
Creek.
Margaret's Creek, and then
Oh,
also
it goes into Margaret's Creek.
there's a bridge.
Is that gonna create more of a problem on Richland? Where's Margaret's Creek dump into the river?
Right, yeah, right near,
At the bridge?
close to the bridge, yeah. It would
Okay.
be kind of northwest of where the bridge
Okay,
is.
so it won't, okay.
It's not the entire neighborhood, though. I live up there.
Uh-huh.
Our stormwater goes down towards Armitage. So every
Okay,
property has lines going out towards the
Okay.
hillsides. So really, you're probably just talking about the apartments.
those apartments, that commercial
Everything else,
building
yeah.
there, and,
The apartments, when they built, they met a new Title 27 stormwater retention requirement. So they retained, and it was separate and distinct from the original University of State's plan. So I think it primarily includes, well, it does include those apartments. It's after going through detention ponds there in front of the apartments. So the roadway, on the boulevard portion of the roadway, up to, not quite, up to the Altamont. Altamont drains down to Armitage as also mentioned.
Okay. Well, hopefully we'll have Widow Cooper here when we bring this up as a case.
It's a very intense development.
yeah, it's big. So it looks, sounds like it's around 180 units then. Because I think there was 100 units in 1 and 2, about 100 units. not-
Correct, yeah, between the two of them, yeah.
1, 2, and 3 bedroom, so, I'm thinking
Right.
400 people.
Yeah, there's a lot of people.
Yeah.
So, and again, this is workforce housing, so it's something that is certainly needed here in the city of Athens. Reports from city planner or from Director Riggs, Development Code Enforcement.
Just two comments, very briefly, Planning Commission members. We are beginning to work on what's called our ADA transition plan, which is, I'm not sure, it's been a while, I think, since we've had a meeting. It's a requirement under federal law that any city that has, I think, more than 50 public employees has to have an ADA transition plan, which focuses on how are you going to get a city that was built prior to the Americans with Disabilities Act established, how are you going to try to ultimately achieve conformance with ADA, what's your plan to do so, and it's really looking at our public buildings, any public accommodations, so rooms like this, entryways to buildings that the public comes and goes from, parking requirements relating to those public buildings, as well as our public rights-of-ways, how we're going to fix sidewalks and curb cuts and all of that. We've already been doing a lot of work historically to try to get things into compliance, of course, and as we're building and improving our public rights-of-ways, we've been achieving it. But we also have to have a document showing what we've done, what we're doing, and how we're, and and then address our priorities into the future. So I've got an intern that I'm working with, well, he's working for us, excuse me. We are starting to work on this project right now. We'll be probably working on it through next year. There will be some public-facing components. We'll have some meetings, et cetera. We're reaching out to the city's Disabilities Commission right now to touch base with them. And then we'll be working, doing inventories of a lot of city buildings to double check our doorways and the entryways and all of those things to see what the requirements are and where we're meeting, and then discuss priorities. So that's just awareness so that you're understanding of that project moving forward. Another item that we've been working on, spending some time on is the census review. I know there's been some media articles about that, double checking to see what happened last summer with how the enumeration was done in Athens and whether we think it's accurate or not. There certainly are some things that we have questions about, and we're trying to reach out to the Census Bureau and find some people who can better explain how the enumerations took place in Athens, and a lot of college towns have the same concerns right now. So we're working through some of that. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you. Director Riggs?
I don't have anything for Planning Commission at this time.
Okay. Citizen Delac. Since you're the only citizen who was.
It's not covered. If I had an opportunity in the last communication, I would have at least said something, so I'll say it now, which is that I appreciate the attention that Service Safety Director Stone gave to pedestrian and bicycle connectivity for that project, the Kershaw project. I've been thinking about that all along, that there needs to be some way to improve connectivity from that facility to the bikeway in particular, to connect people that are going to have fewer vehicles than average for the city, for city residents. So the lower income folks are going to have fewer cars, and many of them will rely on walking and biking. So I think it's important we look at that. So thank you for the attention to that detail.
Thank you. Announcements and other business. Again, I don't have anything to announce, nor do I have any other business. Our next meeting will be October 21st here in council chambers at noon. And therefore, would someone like to make a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
I will second. All right. We are officially adjourned.